Eleanor Whitmore was 74 years old, living alone in a fading wooden house on the outskirts of Ravenbrook, Ohio. The paint on her porch was peeling, the mailbox leaned to one side, and weeds grew freely around the fence. People drove past her house every day without ever slowing down. To the town, Eleanor was just an old woman, weak, forgettable, harmless. But Eleanor remembered everything. She remembered the laughter, the betrayal, and the day her life was torn apart. She remembered the faces of the people who destroyed her family and walked away untouched. Every morning, Eleanor sat by her window with a cup of weak coffee, watching the world pretend she didn't exist. And every night, she whispered one sentence to herself: they will pay. 40 years earlier, Eleanor had been full of life. She was a high school history teacher, kind, respected, and admired. Her husband, Thomas Whitmore, was a factory supervisor, honest and hard-working. They had one son, Daniel, who was the center of Eleanor's world. Their home was filled with laughter, family dinners, and dreams of the future. But Ravenbrook was not kind to honest people. A powerful real estate company, Harrington Developments, wanted the land where the factory stood. Thomas discovered illegal dumping and corruption involving the company's executives. He planned to report everything. Eleanor begged him to be careful. Thomas promised her, "The truth will protect us." He was wrong. One rainy night, Thomas never came home. The police said it was an accident, a hit and run on an empty road. But Eleanor knew better. The bruises didn't match the report. The witnesses disappeared. The case was closed within days. A week later, Eleanor lost her job. The school board claimed budget cuts, but she knew Harrington's money had reached deep into Ravenbrook. Then came the final blow. Daniel, only 19, was falsely accused of assault by the son of a Harrington executive. The real criminal walked free. Daniel was sent to prison. Eleanor stood alone in a courtroom full of lies, her screams swallowed by power and money. That was the day Eleanor Whitmore died. And something colder was born. For decades, Eleanor lived quietly. She never protested. Never begged. Never screamed. People thought she was broken. But silence was her shield. She spent years reading books, law, finance, psychology. She learned how corporations hid crimes, how politicians lied, how reputations could be destroyed without a single bullet. She saved every penny. She wrote everything down. Names. Dates. Crimes. Eleanor was not waiting for justice. She was preparing revenge. At 74, Eleanor began to move. She sold her house quietly and moved closer to the city. Under a different name, she invested in small companies connected to Harrington Developments. No one noticed an old woman signing papers. Soon, leaks appeared in the media, documents exposing illegal land deals, environmental crimes, and bribery. Journalists traced the source to anonymous emails. Harrington's stock fell. Executives panicked. Eleanor watched the news with calm eyes. "One," she whispered. Eleanor contacted former employees, people Harrington had ruined. She listened to their pain and gave them courage. Lawsuits followed. Federal investigations opened. The CEO, Richard Harrington, gave interviews, sweating under studio lights, denying everything. Then Eleanor sent one final envelope. Inside were photos of Thomas's body, and proof of who ordered his death. Richard Harrington collapsed during a board meeting. The man who once ruled Ravenbrook was arrested in handcuffs. Eleanor smiled for the first time in 40 years. Daniel was released from prison after 28 years. His hair was gray, his eyes tired, but he was free. When he stepped outside, Eleanor stood waiting. They held each other and cried without words. "I never stopped," she whispered. "I promised you." Daniel shook his head. "How did you do this?" Eleanor replied softly, "They forgot me. That was their mistake. Revenge had a price." Eleanor's health failed quickly after everything ended. The nights caught up to her. The years of anger burned through her body. But she felt peace. She had not killed anyone. She had simply let the truth breathe. And the truth was more deadly than violence. On a quiet winter morning, Eleanor sat by her window one last time. Snow covered Ravenbrook. Daniel made her tea. "They'll remember you," he said. Eleanor smiled weakly. "No, they'll remember what happens when you underestimate the quiet ones." She closed her eyes. And the fire finally rested. Years later, Ravenbrook built a small library in Eleanor Whitmore's name. People spoke of her as a survivor. A symbol. But Daniel knew the truth. She was not a victim. She was a storm that waited.